Well, hello, and welcome back to another episode of SAF Podcast. And we'll be continuing on our series where we have been looking about the moral argument. So, before diving in, let's just have a quick recap on what the moral argument is. The premise one states that if God does not exist, then moral objective values and duties do not exist. The premise two states that uh, moral objective values and duties do exist. Therefore, we come to the conclusion that God does exist. Okay, so in the previous episode before closing, we had cited one unique quote which was said by Richard Dawkins, and it had really blown our minds off, and I'm sure that some of our audiences as well, and I'm sure that you people must have been waiting for a response on it from us. So let's just start ahead with that quote which was there. So, Jacob,
Yeah,
over to you.
yeah. Um, and the syllogism that Piyush mentioned is what I'm hearing also for the first time. Piyush mentioned moral objective values and duties. I've always heard it as objective moral values and duties. So you learn new things at SAFT.
Okay.
So welcome to SAFT podcast. So the quote that Piyush read out in the last episode was by the infamous Richard Dawkins, and it says. There is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. We are machines for propagating DNA. It is every living object's sole reason for being. So the like as I mentioned last time, this draws up a very gloomy picture for someone who is a human. Yeah, it's a very gloomy picture for any human to read. When we say that our sole reason for being is to propagate DNA, right? And it's also interesting that Dawkins didn't say how we ought to propagate DNA because without having to explicitly mention it, you can propagate DNA by force, right? And we would look down upon anyone propagating DNA by force. So it's odd that Dawkins didn't try to qualify it by saying, propagate DNA by without hurting anyone or anything of that. That being apart, he
Hmm.
also says that there is no evil, no good to this human existence. And how do you put that together with everything that we see around us? How do you put that together with all the evil that happens day in and day out, that has happened in the past and that is going to happen
Yeah.
in the future? So if this is what is going to
Hmm.
be characteristic, or if this is going to be definitive of atheism, no thank you, sir. I would not want to have my way with atheism. And the reason Dawkins says this is he presents this very gloomy picture is that it comes down to the question of, well, how did we come about? If we came about by evolution, then we are here by accident, and there is nothing specifically different between a human and some other species because we are here by a pure accidental outcome of evolution. Nothing specific, not here by any purpose. No one designed us. There is no meaning, value, as we shall see later on. There is no meaning, value, purpose to why we are here, how we ought to live, where we are going. And against that backdrop, I want to read this quote by humanist philosopher Paul Kurtz. So, a humanist is a person who says that human species are distinct, unique, separate from other species. But humanists generally are not theists. So you would find a lot of atheist humanists who would want to stand for values of humanism um, and other such values, where they want to fight for human dignity and human equality within the human race, but they would keep
Hmm.
humanity distinct from other species. So that's, again, as I mentioned, if you're here by accident and pure chance, what really makes us distinct? So this humanist philosopher Paul Kurtz says that the discoveries of Copernicus and Darwin have undermined the belief that we are fundamentally different from all other species. In essence, he says that the belief that we are fundamentally different from every other species, that we are unique when compared with every other species, is made ineffective or is made invalid when we learn about the discoveries of Copernicus, what we learn about the universe and the galaxies and how vast it is and how small a speck we are on planet Earth, and when we learn about the discoveries of Darwin, which, as I mentioned, tells us about the naturalistic, accidental propagation of evolutionary mechanism that brought about different species. Now, what is interesting is that contrary to telling us that we are indifferent among any other species, contrary to telling us that we are just like any other species on planet Earth, the discoveries of Copernicus and Darwin, I would argue, the discoveries of Copernicus and Darwin tells us that we are different and unique from other species. Because do you find a Copernicus or do you find a Darwin from among the animal world, from among the plant world? No, it is just the human, and it is only the humans who are able to reason, understand, make sense of the world, discover, invent, observe, and make hypotheses and learn and explore this universal reality that we are all part of. So, contrary to telling us that we are indifferent from among other species, Copernicus and Darwin and every other scientific enterprise out there tells us that we are actually quite unique. So,
Okay.
we come down to what Paul was speaking about whether we're unique or not, and then to Darwin's point of there's nothing but pointless indifference. The key question to ask is, when you keep a human and some other species on a weighing scale, what is the basis for treating the human different than um, another species? Because if naturalism is true, and naturalism is the view that only the natural world exists, so naturalism would exclude everything that is supernatural. And if you exclude everything that is supernatural, you exclude God as well. So there are different forms of
Mm.
naturalism, like methodological naturalism, where you would want to explain anything and everything by only looking to naturalistic, purely natural explanations and causes and so on and so forth. So, if naturalism is true and the only natural world exists, then moral values, the good and bad of morality, moral values are the byproducts of socio biological evolution. And we see this in the animal world, right? For example, baboons exhibit a cooperative, altruistic, and sacrificial behavior because it is advantageous for their survival. And as it turns out, if naturalism and evolution, macroevolution, and Darwin evolution is all true, it turns out that the baboons sort of passed on these traits of cooperation and altruism and all of that to their cousins, the Homo sapiens. And so for us, these ways of behaving, these ways of conducting ourselves, these moral values are nothing but means to survive. And so we have a herd morality, right? A morality that we all hold together, a herd morality to survive. And there is nothing special about it. Why? Because every other animal species has a tendency and a striving to survive. I think we've all seen that clipping, that video clip from BBC where multiple snakes chase after a lizard and the lizard is skidding past and it is climbing across rocks and all of that.
Mm.
In that video clip, we're seeing a lizard trying to outrun its enemies, outruns its hunters, and stick with survival. And so that's what the humans do as well. So the question is, if we are here by pure naturalistic evolution, unguided accidental process, and if there's nothing beyond this natural world, then the moral values and ideas that we have, it is just an aid to survival. And that's all there is. And therefore, there is nothing really objective about moral values under atheism. But we shall explore that as we move forward.
Yeah. So on the same lines, let me ask you this question. Okay. So if morality is built upon the evolution's progression,
Hmm.
right, and the evolution was a mere accident. So what happens if what if we rewind
Yeah.
the evolution? What would be the case
Yeah.
over there?
Yeah, you hit the hammer, the nail on its head. That is exactly the case. That's what I mentioned earlier. That if this is true,
Hmm.
then we don't have anything objective under atheism, because,
Yeah.
as I mentioned, evolution is a process that comes about by accidental, unguided mutation within genes and organisms. So there's nothing that is guiding
Yeah.
it. It is pure chance, pure probabilistic chance that endows some species with the ability to outrun and outlast the others, and that's about it. And now there is tendencies changing within the evolutionary biological community where they're saying that, okay, it looks like we can't really pin it on pure chance. So they're trying to figure out some mechanisms to explain this guidedness for survival without ascribing a god or a creator. But the point is this: if we rewind this purely naturalistic mechanism, there's a very high probability, an extremely high probability that we would end up with completely different set of species that would also have completely different set of values. Or maybe we may end up with completely different set of species, but not even a single species in that is able to develop or make sense, not develop, make sense of values and duties and morality and as such as we are able to make sense of. So that is what it leads. So a way to explain this is, imagine you're playing a game of snake and ladder, and you roll the dice, you get the dice falls on the digit 6, you move to phase 1, and then you roll it and you move into block 3, and then 5, and there's a ladder there, you go to 12, and then you move on and on and on. So imagine you are charting or using the progression 1, 3, 5, 12, so on and so forth. Imagine you're charting your moral laws, you're developing moral laws based on these progression. And now these progression from 1, 3, 5, and 12, it is not laid out there. If you fall on 5, you get to 12. If you don't fall on 5, if you are 4 on 4, you're there until you move on to the next one. That's about it. So this entire progression of snake and ladder game is purely accidental. And so if you rerun the game, you will get completely different numerical progression. So you are unable to derive the old moral laws. So if you were trying to develop moral laws, if you were to chart a moral order based on the numbers that you fall upon, and as you know, a snake ladder is purely accidental. If you rerun the game, you will get completely different numbers. So you will be charting different moral laws. And what turns out is that your moral laws become illusory. They are fleeting. They're not really there. Because you rerun and it's gone. It's not part and parcel of the whole game. That would, so it's sort of what would happen if you rerun evolution. Because as I mentioned, under a naturalistic evolutionary perspective, under atheism, as that holds together naturalism and evolution as buddies, in that our moral values are the byproducts of socio-biological evolution. As species progress and as humans progress, we adapted and brought together and discovered, well, we won't discover, we invented and we developed this moral understanding as we progress forward. So you move from different stages of progression and you develop your moral values as it happened. But if you rerun, you would have a completely different pathway. So you would have completely different moral laws. And that makes your moral values illusory, not really there.
Right. Okay. So, wow, that was a really simple yet nice example which cleared a lot of my questions. And, the atheist philosopher of science, Michael Ruse, he agrees to this. And he says that the position of the modern evolutionist is that humans have an awareness of morality.
Right.
Because such an awareness is of biological worth, morality is a biological adaptation no less than our hands and feet and teeth. Ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody says, love thy neighbor as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such reference is truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory.
Yeah.
So this is what he mentions, and so let me just try to tell you what we have covered in today's episode till now about objective moral values in relation to atheism. So as we saw in the previous episode's ending, that when we quoted Richard Dawkins, so he mentioned that there is no right, no wrong. And in today's episode, we saw that how that cannot be true, because when we look around us, there is right and wrong in a lot of things. So morality does exist. And if we look at the naturalistic view of the evolution of the morality, how they mention that moral values came with the flow of evolution, with it is built with the base of evolution. So from that we could see that how that cannot be true, because if we rewind and check, each time will see a different way, a different path, and there'll be different values
Yeah.
and different animals, different beings playing different roles in the evolution, right?
Yeah.
Which does not really make much of a sense. So therefore we come to the conclusion that morality is objective, and it has been there. We need to look at a supernatural being if we want to know the true meaning of morality, to understand the existence of morality.
Yeah. So
So I think
you
I've covered.
yeah,
Yeah.
you've covered the whole argument within the summary of this episode. So we will actually be looking at, so because Piyush jumped ahead and gave away the conclusion, he gave away the climax. We will be looking to see in the upcoming episodes on how to build a case whether morality is actually objective, right? Because I've run into people who have said that no, morality is really subjective, and we've asked them, to our atheist friends, we've asked them, okay, in the case of rape, are you really saying that rape is subjectively wrong? And they looked me in the eyes and said, yeah, rape is subjectively wrong. It is not wrong for the rapist, that's why he's doing it, but it is wrong for the uh, the person who's a victim and people who stand by it. And they've asked, okay, how could you know what the other person thinks in their mind? How can you see if they also agree with you? And whole lot of that. So trying to figure out or trying to explore whether morality is really objective is what we will look down the line. But what we focused in today's episode was showing that moral values, objective moral values, can't be put together under atheism. That's the point. You can't have objectively good and bad under atheism. Now, the bigger question is, can you have something that is objectively right and wrong? Can you have objective moral duties under atheism? And I think that is an extremely difficult thing for atheism to defend. But that we will cover in the next episode. So until then, we meet again. Take care and God bless.